coming last month here. Where is Jesus in the Old Testament? All right, you already handed them out? All right. Yep. I do not. You're good. Thank you. All right, come on forward. We're going to talk about Ecclesiastes here, which I said something last week, assuming that we already covered it. We really didn't in this course. So I love this topic. It's fun. You might have heard me teach on this before or preach on it. And we'll do this on the resurrection of Christ. Here, let me open us with prayer. Father, thank you for this time. And for this book of Ecclesiastes, help us to understand it and where Jesus is in it. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, let's jump right in here. Look at my title, Ecclesiastes and What's New Under the Sun. So you might know that refrain, there's nothing new under the sun. The teacher says in Ecclesiastes, or the preacher, sometimes translated. There's nothing new under the sun. And where I'm going with this is what's new under the sun is the resurrection of Jesus. Certainly the crucifixion wasn't new in one regard. It's going to fulfill all the negative stuff that the teacher in Ecclesiastes sees about this world. It all becomes true, painfully true in the cross. We'll get to that. But something that's truly new that really kind of, what should I say, it surpasses Ecclesiastes is the resurrection. All right, Luke 24. We always start with this. Jesus said about the Old Testament, was it not necessary that the Christ, that is the anointed one, by the way, my series is preaching is the number one. You see it right there, the Christ, the anointed one. There's only one mediator, one Messiah, one Christ. Should suffer these things, and then after dying, enter into his glory. And that's really what we're talking about, the resurrection and all that it means, entering his glory. So Jesus says, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. That's basically all the Old Testament. Even like a book of Ecclesiastes. By the way, Ecclesiastes, I don't think, is clearly quoted once in the New Testament. Could be alluded to. There's always questions of when a book is alluded to. But Ecclesiastes is one of these overlooked books. But even it will have something to do with Jesus, as we will see. All right, a little review. We've looked at number 2 and number 3 together. In other words, his suffering and glory. A while ago, not too long ago, we talked about why do we suffer? And that was about number 2, our suffering, but also Christ's suffering. And number 3 as well. What am I talking about? Take the end of Job. And that lesson on why do we suffer, we saw that the end of Job was Job's restoration. And we talked about Job being the most innocent man, the most righteous man on earth. That actually pointed to Jesus, who suffers like Job, but also is restored in the resurrection. Number 3, like Job. Famous deaths in the Old Testament and near deaths, we talked about that. Of course, that's about number 2. Jesus is suffering. But a little bit about number 3. We saw Enoch and Elijah avoiding death. That has something to do with Jesus living forever. And Daniel and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, being saved the last second from death, which, of course, that's like, what do they say, 11:59 on the clock? Those guys are saved. Right? When's Jesus saved? 12:01 on the clock. Too late. He dies. But he's raised from the dead. That's his salvation, the impossible salvation after the clock hasn't expired. Number 3 on that list. Anyway, and last week we looked at Psalm 49 and Proverbs 10, and we talked about how Proverbs 10 is one of the places in the Bible that has a lot of things that seem to not be true always, the righteous will live and the bad people will be punished, that moral order is restored and fulfilled in Christ's resurrection and his rule. The moral order, the righteous really will live, starting with Jesus, but also his people who become righteous by believing in him. Anyway, number 3, again, entering his glory has something to do with Proverbs 10 and Psalm 49. All right, Ecclesiastes. All right, so one of my favorite IT stories, I used to be in the IT field, is Steve Jobs at Apple realizing they needed a real CEO. Of course, they were born out of a garage in Silicon Valley, and so he chooses John Sculley from PepsiCo, Fortune 50 company. He goes and tries to recruit Sculley, and there's a famous conversation that happens, and Sculley himself tells the story. So here's this young punk from Silicon Valley, thinks he's got something great, and Sculley is running a Fortune 50 company, and he's trying to sell him on this, and he's not going for it. He says, and then Steve says one sentence that basically convinces Sculley, and that was this. Hey, John, do you want to keep making sugar water the rest of your life, or do you want to come change the world with me? And I think that's the Ecclesiastes effect. That running a Fortune 50 company, all of a sudden reduced to sugar water, rots your teeth, makes you obese, pre-diabetic, all these things with sugar water. And there's something like that in Ecclesiastes, that you can think that you have an incredible job, incredible life, and there's something in Ecclesiastes that can kind of punch a hole in that balloon. Now, if you don't know Ecclesiastes, just go ahead and open to it. Ecclesiastes, let's just start at the very beginning. Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. So this is 553, if you're using one of our black Bibles here. Now, the way I treat Ecclesiastes here is that it's actually maybe a little darker than we want to admit. And I've seen a number of ways to get around this. I've tried to get around it, but I think the darkness is real, and I'll try to show that to you. Verse 1 of chapter 1, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Now, vanity of vanities. I'm not a big fan of the ESV on this one. We don't use the word vanity anymore, very rarely. I still like the NIV on this one. Everything is meaningless. That's what the NIV translates instead of vanity of vanities. Everything is meaningless. Others, I know Bruce Johnson here at the church, he knows the Old Testament very well. He likes to say everything is pointless. That's not bad, too. All these translation options have strengths and weaknesses. But isn't it weird to see this in the Bible? Everything is meaningless. Vanity of vanities. Everything's vain. Everything. All is vanity. All is meaningless. When I've taught this before, I have this opening slide that I say I'm getting into selling Christian bumper stickers. And I got to make my own. And so I want to find a Bible verse that hasn't been used before. So I put on the bumper sticker, everything is meaningless. It's like, okay, then I need a couple of Christian icons. Put a cross next to it. I put an ichthus next to that. There you go, the next Christian bumper sticker. Everything is meaningless. It doesn't sound right, right? Yet it's here in the Bible. Everything is meaningless. And then what's he talking about? Verse 3. Let's read some of this to get a feel of what he's saying. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. We die, and yet the earth goes on, but what's the big deal? We die. For or 5, the sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. Do you hear the circularity of this? Right? Now the seasons are circular. The tides are circular. Nothing wrong with that. But if you're trying to figure out the meaningfulness of life, the meaningfulness of the world, where's it all going, a circle doesn't help you. It's going nowhere. It's just, lather, rinse, repeat or whatever, right? All the streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. It's tiring. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what was been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has already been in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. We will be forgotten. What's that old thing? You can remember your grandparents. I bet you know a little bit about your great-grandparents. Does anyone here know anything about their great-great-grandparents? Maybe a little bit. Okay, from Kenya. That's great, yeah. There's a couple of you, but and then if I go great-great-great, no remembrance. Now, nothing new under the sun. Is that true? Again, since I was in the field of technology for so long, I would want to kind of interrogate the teacher here, the preacher here, and say, are you sure there's nothing new under the sun? Have you seen the iPhone? Have you seen technology? A lot's happened since he wrote this. I became increasingly convinced to this day that he would not be impressed, as we might think, by technology. Bigger and better tools and toys. Congratulations. Did anything really fundamentally change in this world through technology or through anything? Is there really anything new under the sun? Now, that's the way this book begins. Kind of a downer. What's the point of everything? I see circularity in the natural world. I see we're going to be forgotten. I see death in the human world. And so when I've taught this, sometimes I say, what does this guy need? Does he need a hug? Does he need Zoloft? What does he need, right? Well, let's see his last words. Turn to chapter 12. And I won't read all of 1 through 8, but his last word is 8. Chapter 12, verse 8. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity. All is meaningless. He ends with that. Now, you might say there's 3 more paragraphs. That's a different person speaking, the frame narrator, we say. And I've a much longer lesson on this I won't go through. But this guy does not change what the teacher is saying. I know he ends with, God will bring every deed into judgment or every secret thing, whether good or evil. Fear God, keep his commandments, and so forth. And that's another thing, but that does not change what the preacher says. So he began with everything is meaningless, and then 12:8, he ends with everything is meaningless. Now, I point that out because one of the things as I was struggling with this book was maybe he ends on a happy note. Right? We have a lot of psalms like that. Just about all the psalms of lament, except for 1 or 2, ends on kind of a rallying in faith. Now, not Psalm 88. Darkness is my closest friend, but but he doesn't rally like that. It's a sustained 12 chapters of nothing dislodging him from everything looks meaningless. Sugar water. Sugar water. You think you're making Pepsi for millions and millions of people, John Scully. You're just making sugar water. All right. Now, On the bottom of my first page, I have, true enough, not all of this book is negative. And that's true. Negative I have in quotes, if you call this negative what I just covered. For instance, I have 3, 9 through 13. There's some pleasant observations, pleasant stuff. He can celebrate beauty, food, drink, work. I don't want him to sound like some kind of relentless curmudgeon. That's not true. He knows some things about God that are good. He knows a lot of things in creation, like food, drink, beauty, that are good. He's not a relentless curmudgeon. What he's struggling with, and it drives him nuts, is what's the point of everything in this world? Where's it going? And that might be relevant. Maybe you felt this in your own life. If you feel like the world is all sound and fury, signifying nothing, and we're going to the death of the earth, the heat death of the universe, whatever scenario you've heard, it can then make you think, what am I doing here on earth? What's the point? You ever have that thought? Right? This is what kids discover on their own and adults are like never talking about. But Ecclesiastes puts it front and center. If you can't see what the world is about and what God is doing, what are you doing that's really of any usefulness? It's a dark, dark thought. So he's not like I said, a full curmudgeon. He's celebrating good things in this world. He sees them. He just can't see what it's all about. 6 deflating observations I'd have on the top of your next page. I got these 6 categories from Vern Poythress looking at this part of this angle on the book. Why is he down? The teacher, the preacher. Well, 1, suffering. No surprise there. He sees suffering in the world. It's a deflating observation. Number 2, he sees injustice, even in the place where justice should happen. That's really deflating. I think of students who go to law school and they're all excited on justice, and then they're like, oh, shoot. This is where some of the greatest injustices happen in the legal courts, right? That can really be deflating. Or if you see injustice in the household of God. 3, pathetic humanity. Now, I mean pathetic, not like cold calculating evil, but envy, laziness, mindless dissatisfaction, pettiness. Do not take to your heart all the things that people say, lest you hear your servant cursing you. Your heart knows that many times you yourself have cursed others. That's a little nugget of wisdom there. You can get down on what you hear people saying about you, and he says, hey, you've said things about people. Pathetic humanity, even that kind of gossip. 4, failure. Again, I saw that under the sun, the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to those with knowledge. But I covered this earlier with you. This is the only place I know of the word chance in the Bible, in most translations. But time and chance happen to them all. And that's what it looks like out there. Failure. Those who deserve to win, don't always win. 5, futility. This is different than failure. Futility means even your successes don't matter. Again, the teacher in Ecclesiastes says, I have seen a man that God has given talent to, yet he didn't have the opportunity to enjoy what he had worked for. Futility for the development of that talent didn't matter. And then 6th, death, which we've already seen him refer to. So these are 6 deflating observations. Now, the time I have remaining here, let's start turning this towards Christ. And then we'll talk Q&A here if you want to. So I'll never forget, going to buy an engagement ring with my bride-to-be, Lisa. And if you've had this experience, you might know what a foil is. Now, I don't mean tin foil. That's only I knew at that time. But the foil is this incredible black velvet or some kind of black soft substance, material. They lay that down on the counter and then show you the engagement rings, right, with the diamonds sparkling. The foil is that incredible black background which makes it sparkle brilliantly all the more. Pretty smart from a sales perspective, right? Here's my point. Ecclesiastes is not the diamond, it's the black foil. It's that black velvet. That you have someone who is seeing a lot of deflating things, 6 deflating observations, and can't see what God's up to, where this world is going. It looks like it's all circular and that we disappear and are forgotten. I could have quoted other parts. Some of you know the bird song, Turn, Turn, Turn. That's Ecclesiastes 3. That might sound a little encouraging. There's a time for everything. Beautiful song, but actually there's despair under that if you scratch the surface. There's a time to build towers. Then there's a time for them to be destroyed. Nothing's gained. You hear the despair? Nothing's gained. There's a time to gather stones. There's a time to scatter stones. Nothing's gained. There's despair under this. Nothing new under the sun. He cannot see what's going on. Now, the black foil that this is that when Jesus comes, and particularly in his resurrections, that's what we're talking about here, this is the brilliance of the diamond, something new under the sun. All right? But will that stand up to the hard-nosed intellectual scrutiny of Ecclesiastes? All right, so I want you to imagine this conversation I have with the teacher or with the preacher. And I try to say to him, hey, cheer up, buddy. Some amazing things have happened. You didn't live long enough. But this guy, Jesus of Nazareth, came sent from God, and he did some amazing things. And I've noticed in your book, this is key to my observations, in your book, you never talk really about certain things. You're observing nature, you're observing human history, you're really operating on your eyeballs and your rational thought, and what you leave out are the prophets. Ecclesiastes never quotes the prophets. God's covenantal promises. He mentions the temple or a temple once in chapter 5, I think. But basically, a lot of the special revelation, supernatural revelation, God's promises, the prophets, and so forth, it's like the guy isn't citing these. I think that's key. He's relying on observations like a scientist and his rational thought like a philosopher, trying to figure everything out, and he can't figure it all out. But I'm going to help him. I'm going to say, Jesus, this guy came. Let me tell you about him. All right? The teacher can say, hey, go ahead. And say, man, he did miracles. You didn't mention seeing any miracles yourself. They don't always happen. But he did a flood of miracles, including healing people. Really? The teacher can say. That's interesting. Yeah. He drove out demons. There was a supernatural world, and demonic possession really ramped up during his time. He drove out demons. Wow. Okay. But then he can say, what about death? Because death comes to all. Ecclesiastes talks about death a lot. And I could say to him, he raised at least 3 people from the dead. Lazarus and 2 others we hear of, right, in the Gospels. That's something new under the sun, right? Or is it? The teacher can say, all right, that's amazing. He raised these 3 people from the dead. And then what happened? And the Bible doesn't say this clearly, but the answer is they died again, right? Lazarus and the other two died again. And so the teacher can say, well, okay, that was amazing, but like I said, nothing new under the sun. And then the teacher can say, can you tell me how this all ends? What happens to this Jesus guy? He did miracles, even raising people from the dead. What happens to him? And this is where I might get a little embarrassed. You know, what happened on Good Friday? I say, well, all right, they killed him. They got him. What do you mean? Well, the religious leaders, and he was betrayed by one of his own disciples, handed over to the religious leaders. All the other disciples kind of ran in fear and lied, didn't know him, Peter. It's kind of embarrassing. No one really sticks up for him. He's crucified by the Romans, a foreign occupying power, crucified him easily. Didn't even really want to do it, Pilate did, but anyway. Now go back to those 6 observations, deflating observations. Because the author, the teacher here can say, that's what I'm talking about right there. So you have this guy who does miracles, right? Even raises people from the dead. But exactly what I said in my book, so suffering, injustice, number 2, including in the place where justice should happen, the leaders of God's people, the Jewish Sanhedrin. Pathetic humanity. How pathetic is this? Judas hands him over for 30 pieces of silver. Disciples run and flee. Peter lies. Failure. The race is not to the swift. Jesus embodies that. Futility. Even your successes don't mean anything. That's what it looks like on Good Friday. And then, of course, death. All 6 of these deflating observations, the teacher in Ecclesiastes can say, that's exactly right. You just proved what I said. Nothing new under the sun. Now, I already said this next part. Where did the teacher go wrong? He admitted God's work of redemption of this futile world, which points to Christ. He omitted talking about the promises of God, the patriarchs, chosen Israel, God's redeeming love, the sacrificial system, prayer, the great exodus, any divine miracles, any prophets, prophetic word. I counted all these reading the book years ago. It's amazing how much he relies on his observation and his brute force thinking. And this is why science class and philosophy class won't give you all the answers. Ecclesiastes. You can't just rely on observation. There's a lot of things we can learn from science. I love science. A lot of things we can learn from the best of philosophy, thinking rigorously and so forth. But Ecclesiastes shows the limits. All right. So now, all right. I left something out here. So now I feel like saying to the teacher, you got me. Yes, Jesus' miracles, in a sense, aren't something new under the sun. He raised 3 people from the dead, but they died anyway. And then these 6 deflating observations, they all become painfully true in Jesus' death. You got me. Well, that's where we can say, but what about his resurrection? That's what I mean about entering into his glory. Back to our first verse there, Luke 24. Entering into his glory. This is what is brand new. Because I can say to the teacher, I can say to him, wait a second. After he's crucified, which is suffering, injustice, pathetic humanity, failure, futility, death, you're right. Give it a few days. He rises from the dead. And the teacher can say, all right, to die again, just like those other 3? No. Something new under the sun. He's the first fruits, the first one to rise from the dead, never to die again. What do you mean by that? He rises with a glorified body, 1 Corinthians 15, an indestructible life, Hebrews. He rises as the first one to live forever in a glorified, restored, renewed, upgraded body. And he's the king of that next world that is glorified. You want to know where human history is going? You can't see it by seeing the tide go in, the tide go out. You can't see it by the sun rising, the sun setting. You can't see it there. You can't see it in human history. Towers are built, towers will be destroyed. But it's there, as the prophets have spoken, and the covenant, all the things he left out. God's plan fulfilled in Christ, that something truly new under the sun happens on Easter morning. So Ecclesiastes, that black velvet, kind of dark, kind of depressing, saying what intellectuals can't know from mere observation and from mere brute force reasoning. A lot of bad things happen in this world, but on Easter Sunday, when Jesus enters his glory, it overturns this. I said Ecclesiastes I don't think is clearly quoted anywhere in the New Testament. There's a question if it's alluded to in Romans 8. Romans 8, one of the most important chapters. And the idea of this world is groaning, waiting for its redemption. That I don't know if that's Ecclesiastes language exactly, but this idea of this world is groaning with these 6 horrible things. And that is, of course, a great chapter about Jesus entering his glory, the resurrection, and the Spirit being poured out. And this world that is groaning will be transformed because something new under the sun has already appeared. So we end with us. I know we're talking about Christ in the Old Testament, but what's worth doing? What's worth your life doing here? Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. Not in vain if you're working for the Lord. 1 Corinthians 15 is the great chapter. I highlighted not in vain because, vanity of vanities, to use the ESV here. I almost said ESPN. Use the ESV here. Vanity of vanities, not in vain. It overturns it. It's the resurrection chapter to really confirm what we've been saying. Life after death is important, and it's not just Jesus's, but ours after death too. Worship here today is not in vain, for instance. And I end with one verse, well done, good and faithful servant. If you're wondering what you do in life matters, it matters because Jesus is risen from the dead. And when we see him, we want to hear those words, well done, good and faithful servant, which means our work has value. It's not everything is meaningless or vain under the sun. Okay, that's for the recording. So now we can discuss the last 10 plus minutes we have here, 12, 13. Any thoughts, comments, questions? Yes, Bill.
First of all, wine, women, work, song, those things may not be evil in and of themselves, but they certainly are if you make them idols.
Yes.
So ultimately, none of those satisfy.
And you're saying, because those are all in Ecclesiastes.
They're all mentioned in Ecclesiastes,
Right.
but none of them are going to satisfy because only he can satisfy. And he's going to blind people. People's eyes are blinded until he draws them to himself. Then they're able to see that the purpose is to everything is to glorify him, as opposed to seeking those things. If you're seeking those things first, you're not seeking him.
That's right. So the first thing what Bill said in here is exactly right. Ecclesiastes celebrates at times, but doesn't idolatrize or make ultimate. Marriage, drink, food, work, nature, buildings, accomplishments, all of them. You can find verses where it's saying, he's saying, yeah, this is good. It's a gift. Great. But don't think it tells you what life is ultimately about. If you make it ultimate, it will be an awful idol. So that's true. And then you talk about your Lord opening your eyes, right? So this is where people can, maybe get in the rat race and pursue these goods. And all of a sudden, they realize, wait, what am I doing? it was sci-fi, I think. Going forward in time machine, X thousand years, and the person gets out of the time machine, and what do they sense? No life. Just utter stillness. Absolute stillness. And this Christian heard this, and he's like, no. It kind of clicked for him. He's like, no, that can't be how it ends, right? But death wins, right? But that's the scientific projection. So for him, that was the moment of, whoa, what's it all about? Ecclesiastes, starts to make sense. And unless God intervenes and does something new in this world, redeeming it, starting with the resurrection of Christ, then it really does bring up these nihilistic thoughts where you get around it, and how to get around it. Hey, yeah, well, what's the next week? Another question, comment? Yeah.
I just think it's interesting to even ask, like, why do we need something new? Why do we ask, is there anything new under the sun? Unless our hearts are really centered on eternity in the first place.
What verse are you quoting? Because Ecclesiastes, he has set eternity in the hearts of men. Yep. We are a unique species, right? We have the image of God, we have the Word, and there is a plan, of seeing what's that going, what's all meaning, how do I plug into what God's doing?
I think one reason that we want something new is that the existing status is so messed up. If the existing pattern of the world was beautiful and perfect and delightful, and people were just kind to each other, and there wasn't hunger, and I don't know that there would be quite the same longing for that to change. That's what I was thinking, at least when I was reading, hearing them.
I guess that is the next life.
Yeah.
When it is perfect, we won't be like, oh, we should think. Yeah, where we're going, that's all.
I was just thinking, I'm a little bit reminded of, the promise of the Holy Spirit when I hear about either the oppressed or the oppressor.
Yes. Yeah. Interesting. Anyone else? Neither the oppressed nor the oppressor have a comforter. They're left without a comforter. And that's one of the painful observations. Suffering. Not only they're suffering, but they're left without a comforter.
I remember one of the times you did Ecclesiastes and AdultEd years ago, you made a compelling case for a skeptic starting in Ecclesiastes in terms of the first place to go biblically, to basically create the foil, if you will.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, over time, do you still stand by that as far as that being a great?
Yeah, management they are. Yeah, management they are.
Yeah.
But it is skeptical. Kind of that skeptical, thoughtful male. Could be female. If I'm profiling. That's why I see those kind of folks that come to Christ through Ecclesiastes, right? I've seen I've heard a number of stories like that. Is it scroll too? Was it? I forget, was that Ecclesiastes? I can't remember. The tree falls in the forest and lies there. That was King Scroll's conclusion. What? The tree falls in the forest and lies there. And he's like, that's me. That's the futility of that image. And I'm talking about Bart Ehrman a while ago. So Bart Ehrman is a famous skeptic, New Testament scholar at UNC Chapel Hill. And he lost his faith, he said, in seminary. We dealt with one of his books a few weeks ago. And he likes Ecclesiastes. It's my favorite book. It's like the skeptical book in there, right? And so it didn't work on him, you could say. But I think to myself, if you really drink it down to the dregs part, because there's this part of it like, oh yeah, I like the little digs he gets and everything, You drink it to the dregs, you might not love it, and what it does to your animals.
Well, until you mentioned 1 Corinthians 15 today, that echo of Abraham's never in vain is, who knows, they call it, specifically have that in mind as a hat tip, who knows? But the bookend's beautiful.
Yes, it really is a throwing in Ecclesiastes, nothing new under the sun. We don't know what God's up to or anything, but nope. Now we know. Now we know.
Does it seem to you that you're seeing in Ecclesiastes like a full teasing out the implications of the curse in Genesis 3? It's like there's no technology or society to speak of in Genesis 3, but if you had it and you grew out of one, that would look like Ecclesiastes. So
That's right.
it's like the reverse of the curse.
Yeah, I don't know, Genesis 3 and the curse, we see human sin, we see satanic temptation, we see thorns and thistles, we see shame, we see hiding, the need for all that stuff, right? And a lot of people have said Ecclesiastes is kind of the picture of so much of what went wrong, since then. 12 chapters, it's a stark picture. Kind of the fruit itself. Right. Yep. Okay.
So I'm thinking, so this is Solomon,
Now, so it looks like the first verse.
Right.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering, yeah, it was the first book that was written. I know that when it came to letter, and then you end up, I see. That's not real.
So you're saying if Job is earlier,
Yeah,
That
would
is-
he have known about that?
now there's questions we can't answer there. We kind of, yeah, we don't know. We don't know. If Job is the earliest, which a number of people have argued, I don't know if it is. The earliest book written, I don't know. And if it is, does the teacher in Ecclesiastes have it, have access to it, or why not? I know that my Redeemer lives right there in Job. I don't know. I can't answer these. What?
No, he's not really, now that I say that. He doesn't really reference anything.
Right?
Sure.
Exactly. And that's what, when I was struggling with this book, everything is meaningless. You're like, oh, well, he didn't mean that. Well, he says it at the end, right? It's just a lament or something. Well, man, dude, it looks like he's really analyzing things. And it's not just an emotional down moment with the Lord, but a song of lament. So all these comparisons that people want to make to the Psalms just doesn't fully fit. And so, I told some of you this story. Don't forget, Bible study. I was at Ohio University. I was a new Christian. I was there for the summer. And so they had a summer Bible study that showed Ecclesiastes. There's a grad student in psychology. And we read the beginning, and he says shockingly to the whole group at a Campus Crusade Bible study, I hear what he's saying, but I've got to disagree